What makes a happy marriage? Dr. Carolyn Clansy Miller, with over 20 years' experience as a clinical psychologist, discusses topics from communication in marriage, weekly heart checks, and how your spouse can be a dream catcher. Dr. Miller is happily married and has a thriving practice on the beautiful island of St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. She is truly an international scholar, educator, counselor, coach, and has a passion for ministry. She had a counseling service and was director of education and pastoral care at Lakewood Church in Houston. Dr. Miller has taught at Houston Baptist University. She has volunteered and trained hundreds of church leaders and students at the West Africa Theological Seminary in Lagos, Nigeria. Stay tuned to the end when my guest, Carolyn, shares with us how she lost 50 pounds on her journey to physical and mental fitness.
Baransu Balance Podcast with Dr. Ince emphasizes the interdependence and importance of a healthy mind, body, and soul.
Hello. Welcome, Dr. Clansy Miller, Dr. Carolyn Clansy Miller, to another episode of Baransu Balance Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ince. It's a pleasure.
Okay. So today we are going to talk a little bit about marriage relationships or relationships with our significant other. We know that marriage rates are decreasing, 45% at last count, but today we want to know how to have a happy and satisfactory marriage or relationship. As a psychotherapist and family counselor with years of experience, what would you say was the number one cause of conflict in marriages and relationships? And what tips do you have for us to avoid or to abide by?
Okay. Well, I have worked with marriages and couples for a number of years, and probably my personal experience has been that miscommunication is probably the number one underpinning of conflict. And what I try to teach people when in couples therapy is how to be active listeners, how to listen and to hear and listen to understand instead of listening to respond or to defend themselves. Many times when couples get into an altercation, they are activated. And so one of the things we talk about in couples therapy, and when I say activated, I mean physiologically activated. So their central nervous system is on and they go into fight or flight. And then it becomes very difficult to be able to really hear each other or even to respond in a way that's appropriate. We call that flooding in marriage therapy, when a person is physiologically flooded. And so when you're physiologically flooded, the first step is not to continue the conversation and continue to try to defend yourself. The first step should be to pause and deal with the flood.
Okay. So Dr. Carolyn, it seems like both of us are broadcasting from hotels and we're busy. And so right this very minute, I am, or at least I thought you were at a hotel. Back home. Okay. So right this very minute, my husband is a few hundred miles away and kind of missing him, but we want to be a little practical on this program today. So I'm going to go back to a time when we first met a number of years ago. We won't say how many, but early on in my marriage, a stressful period every single year would be around the holidays, Christmas time. And my mother, who is currently 99 years old, and I can think of nothing bad about her at this point because she's unfortunately languishing in the hospital. But back then, without fail, when my mother came to visit, I would immediately go into the fight or flight mode
Mm.
and say, "So, Walter, why don't you want to go out to eat with my mother?" And so, so what you're saying is that part of communication is sometimes overwhelmed with this fight or flight emotions. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes when we have conflicts in communication, that's what happens to an individual while they're communicating. They get upset and you can feel it. You can feel your temperature raising and you become flush. And what you don't know is that your eyes might be dilating, your muscles are constricting, your digestion shuts off, your hormones are kicking in. You don't know that. Your whole body is reacting, but you can feel the emotion. And so what happens is that when your frontal lobe is also affected because your amygdala is hijacked, and I know that that's too much information for most people, but what they need to know is you can't think. You don't think clearly and you don't see yourself. So we call it watchtower. You're not able to be self-observant. So sometimes we don't know that our voice is getting louder or that we just
or one or two octave higher. My husband always says, "Why are you yelling?" I'm not
yes.
yelling, I'm just enunciating. I just happen to have a voice that's an octave higher than it normally is.
That's how I feel too. One of my tells the same thing. But the reality is that you're not self-aware. And you don't always have full recollection of things either because your hippocampus is affected. People don't know that they don't have full capacity of their brain. We like to say, in regular language is that, I don't have access to my faculties. My faculties aren't working. Well, they're not. They're really not. And we need to in order to really be engaged and be able to do the hard work of being able to process whatever the content is of the conflict, to deal with the conflict. We need to be able to do that to do the next step, which is to be able to see the dream within the conflict. Can I talk about that? Yeah.
No, please expound on that. The dream within the conflict.
Yes.
It
And
sounds kind of deep.
Okay, well, let me tell you where it comes from. All of this comes from Gottman's couples therapy. They've written lots of books. John Gottman is like the guru of marriage therapy. He's done 40 plus years of research on marriage couples therapy. And what they have found is that when it comes to relationships and when it comes to communication, that oftentimes there's a dream that's underlining the communication. So we are talking, you may have been talking about, my mom's in town, and you talk to your husband, Walter, why don't you want to spend time with your mother? But what is underlining the conflict, if there is conflict around that, is a dream that you may have had around family.
Okay.
Yeah, there may have been, I'm just kind of making that as an analogy, that there may have been, or an example that there may have been a dream about that you have about your husband's relationship with your mom. There may be a desire and a dream about that, not a literal dream, but kind of an unconscious desire that is not expressed. It's expressed in, we're going to the mall, would you like to come with us? And now that you don't want to come with us, why don't you want to come with us? And it becomes this layer where we're talking very surfacely because I'm watching the game or the football game, and that kind of, it goes back and forth at that level. But the real is that there's it is a core value, a core desire, a core need, and we don't get unless we ask some questions that will help unpackage why this might be important to the person. But
So to me, it was almost like allegiance. You know,
Mm,
my mother comes in town once a year. It seems like
mhm,
you should understand that I need to, you know, switch my allegiance to her for a few
mhm,
days.
mhm.
But evidently, he psychologically deep down didn't understand that. And I was probably making things worse.
And he may have had his own dream. He may have had his own dream of allegiance to him.
Okay.
Yeah, he may have. So,
Okay.
so just to say, if we could use that, thank you so much for allowing us to use that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is being able to unpack why it's important to the person. And so when we're in communication with our partner, oftentimes we're trying to defend ourselves and we're talking to our partner almost as if they are, that they're not our friend and the person that we love and that kind of thing, that they become in some ways, I'm not saying that they're an enemy, that's quite strong, but they're not on the team. And when when you still see this person as this person's on the team, then what do we ask that person? Well, why is this important to you? Tell me more about why that matters to you. Tell me more about what your thoughts are. Tell me more. And when you do that, then you begin to unpack the real core needs, the dreams, the values, the beliefs, the level of importance that's underpinning the conversation. And so when you go back to your initial question about, what's the number one cause of conflict with couples, I think it's miscommunication because we never get to that place where we really understand the why.
Okay. So, you know, in the past, we were told that we need to use the feeling language and, you know, say, I feel upset when you do this. And it seems to work to a degree in that you're not accusing your partner of, you know, bad motives or character. You're expressing your feelings.
Mhm.
And, you know, like I said, right now, my conflicts appear, you know, minor in the big scheme of things, but might as well go on to my second conflict. Is that all right?
Sure, sure, sure.
Or major conflict in my eyes. And that is my husband is very practical, and I'm a very, I call it low maintenance, simple person. And I love to walk, but he doesn't seem to understand that I want to walk with him.
Mm,
And to me, it's a sign of rejection.
mm,
Intellectually, I know it's not, but emotionally, I feel like it's a sign of rejection. So,
mm.
how do you re- reframe these thoughts in your head,
Well, that's that
or
scenario.
does it need to be reframed, or it needs to be discussed further?
Well, I think that there are a lot of different approaches to that scenario. The first thing that comes to mind are more questions actually for you. So, so I would be curious if I were your couples therapist. I'd be curious about other times when you felt rejected by him. I'd be curious about that. And I'm not asking you to share that now. And the
Okay.
I'm bringing that to the table is because the people don't always understand their attachment styles. And so sometimes we have cultivated an attachment style that could that creates kind of like this default sense of rejection. And we call that kind of like an anxious attachment style. So when we've had some, it can happen as in adulthood for sure, when we've had relationships in the past as adults or as young adults that might have led to feelings of abandonment or rejection and things like that. If the person was what the young people say now, ghosted us, those kinds of things. We feel rejected. But it can also be a symbolic of the relationship that we've had with our parents, so if we start looking at early attachment with our parents, inconsistent parents, parents that were unavailable, emotionally unavailable, or inconsistent in different ways. I mean, those kinds of things create a view that
Okay.
a child has around the world about safety,
Mm-hmm.
around rely on, around worthiness, around and the positive side of security and safety.
Okay. So
Sure,
what
yeah.
what I've learned in the past few months is that you don't necessarily have to have had a major trauma in your childhood, but or your parents' childhood, but nevertheless, traumas in your parents' background can affect their parenting styles, which can go down from generation to generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like, I had a fairly good childhood as far as rejecting and trauma, and my mother's childhood, her life was uprooted when, World War II, they were required to leave their homes with her baby brother to the relocation camps from California to Arkansas. So
Mhm.
some of those traumas, I'm thinking, kind of spilled over to our generation.
Could
But
be. Could be.
and so I just feel like it's so important to give our significant others and people in our lives grace and have some type of understanding of where they're coming from.
I agree.
So yeah, so this podcast is about the balance of the mind, body, and soul, and your background seems to dovetail perfectly into our goals. So some of our listeners were brought up reading Paul's writings in the Bible about women submitting to their husbands, and the difference between respect and love. Are there differences between men and women, in your opinion, in their roles of the relationships?
Um, Tell me a little bit more about that. What you mean by that question?
Okay. So in the past, women were told that men wanted respect,
Mhm. Like
and
the
and that women wanted more love.
Mhm.
So that has to do with the male ego and
Is it?
respect and all of that. So that's my question.
Well, like I said, there is a book, a Christian marriage couples relationship book called Love and Respect. And the author's position is that men really desire love. I mean, I'm sorry, respect. And when they don't get it, they withhold it. And when women really desire love, and when they don't get it, they withhold it. And it becomes this, what he calls a crazy cycle. I've seen that pattern. I've
Withhold what?
love.
Oh.
Like they don't
Mm,
receive his position in the book Love and Respect,
mm,
that women desire and need love. He's not saying exclusively like women don't desire and need respect, but
mm.
it's a primary thing going based on Paul's writings. I think it was in Ephesians. Sure, you might remember that. Um, it's about loving your wives, respecting your husbands, that passage. And so the author talks about how men primarily need respect, and when they don't receive it, they withhold it. They withhold love. I'm sorry. And when women primarily need love, and when they don't receive it, they withhold the respect, and it becomes a crazy cycle or conflict between the two because each person is not getting what they need And his contention is that one person needs to get off the crazy cycle, needs to jump off the merry-go-round. And when that person is able to merry-go-round and give the respect that to their husband that he needs, or he gives the love that to his wife that she needs, that that the crazy cycle stops, that they're able to begin to resolve their conflict. And your question to me about, what my position is on that, I've seen that cycle. I've definitely seen that cycle, and I've seen people feel entitled to holding on to love and not giving it because they feel that another person doesn't deserve it. And I feel seeing how that cycle perpetuates conflict between couples. I don't know that that is the case for everyone, because I've seen where, and maybe some of it is how we name what we need. And so some people may use the language of I need respect, and some other people may use other words to describe their core needs. But I have seen the pattern of needs not being met and needs being withheld out of hurt. And I've seen the opposite of needs being fulfilled intentionally, recognizing that this person needs X, Y, and Z. I think a good example of that are kind of like the 5 love languages, that this person needs words of affirmation, this person needs acts of service, those kinds of things. And when they receive that, I've seen how it makes a big difference. People need and understood and loved. And I think that when couples, I've seen, usually with healthy couples, that when they receive that, and not only when they receive it, but when they also give it, that it definitely helps to cultivate healthier marriages.
It is refreshing when you are around healthy couples, because they uplift each other and they seem to genuinely enjoy each other's company instead of trying to tear each other down. So I definitely agree about the importance of respect, mutual respect, and not so-called withholding love. So I want to jump to another question. And I understand that the first 10 years, Dr. Clancy, of marriage are pretty much the make or break years. And so how would you recommend that couples negotiate these first 10 years? Do you think that there should be written contracts about, okay, I'll cook, you take out the garbage, or we'll have sex on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Sunday evening? Any suggestions to make those 10 years in our busy, or our younger listeners' busy lives?
Well, I don't know that people necessarily need that kind of rigidity to create a contract, because life changes, and within 10 years, a lot can change based on a lot of factors: children's, jobs, unexpected happenings that happen. So in terms of keeping a schedule, I think it needs to be reevaluated. And I think having times to come together and reevaluate how things are going and be able to troubleshoot to create a plan that works for both people is important. So I recommend what I like to call a heart check. So a heart check could happen weekly for a busy couple, if it just, or it could happen daily if you want to. A heart check can happen both in writing and verbally. So it's basically a time to talk about whatever the issues are and process those issues, both good heart checks. You might have some really good things that are happening, and you want to keep those things. You're really enjoying the fact that your spouse made turkey burgers like my husband does. You know what I mean? You really enjoyed that. So you want to keep that part going on a Sunday. Um, so you can talk about things that you really appreciate about your spouse, that you appreciate about your relationship. You can do that verbally. And I also talk to people about sometimes having a journal, a couple's journal that you have on your dresser that's just for the two of you, if that's a safe place, because you may have kids that can walk in and read it. But having it somewhere and then writing down how you feel, that kind of thing. Or if there's something that you want to put on the list to discuss during the heart check, you can put that there. But the point that I'm making is having regular times and strategic times. And if anything was structured, I would say that it doesn't necessarily have to be on Thursday mornings at 9 o'clock for the next 10 years, because that may have to change. But continually having one for 10 years would probably be very helpful. It's very similar to, we were talking prior to the show, with your background being in medicine and mine being in psychology, about how a lot of things with mind body are beginning to merge. People are talking about that. And, and one of the things that we're finding is that body holds emotions, that when people don't process their emotions, that they can feel it physiologically sometimes. You might have chronic constipation or chronic diarrhea, things like that. And the body and the mind, we're supposed to move. We're not supposed to hold on to resentments and hold on to guilt and hold on to grief. We do experience it because we're human, but we should also, that should also move through us, and that's the same thing that needs to happen in relationships, is that we have conflicts, and that I think we need to normalize that. Sometimes in the first 10 years, it is tough because you're learning each other. You're learning what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a wife, and what it means to be a husband and a wife to your particular partner. Your family constellation may have been changing. There's a lot of different factors that happen in 10 years, and lots of reasons for conflict for healthy and unhealthy couples. Conflict in and of itself does not mean that it's necessarily a bad thing, but if we don't take time to address the conflict, then it really doesn't go anywhere. Just like how emotions can kind of stick to us and not process through. But if we have a system for addressing it, and that's why I like to use heart checks to be able to talk about things, then we have a way to process and allow it to move through.
So during the heart check, but it's not always addressing grievances that had accumulated the past week, is it?
No, not
No.
necessarily.
Yeah.
It can be good things as well.
Okay. All right.
And one other thing I would say to all couples, and especially to young couples, and with respect to normalizing conflict, what Gottman has found in his research is that healthy and unhealthy couples all have conflict. And sometimes healthy couples and unhealthy couples have egregious moments, regrettable incidences that we wish never have happened. And so the difference, he says, though, between an unhealthy and a healthy couple is the healthy couple's capacity to repair. How fast you repair is a sign of health and strength. So what I have found in practice is that a lot of times I'll ask, well, when did this incident occur that they're upset about? And it may have been, well, it happened about 3 weeks ago, 2 months ago, 5 months ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And they're still, they've never been able to repair. And that is a skill to be able to address something and heal from it, figure out how to negotiate what needs to be negotiated, forgive what needs to be forgiven, all of those kind of things, and heal. And healthy couples are able to do that faster. And again, using kind of like a fitness analogy, when we are exercising, and if you do resistance training and things like that, or circuit training, when you first start, it's really difficult in between sets. You might find yourself really tired in between sets. But the healthier you become, the faster you recover during the recovery period. You recover fast. So when you go to the next set, you're not as tired. It's not that the weight has changed, you become stronger, and your capacity to go from one set to the next is easy because the recovery is faster. And the same thing, and we see that even with HIIT training as an example, where you have high intensity, low intensity. When you go down to the low intensity, you should see your heart recover faster. And when it begins to recover faster, that's a sign of increased fitness and strength. It's the same thing for couples, that the recovery time, how fast you recover from something, is a sign of health. The fact that you have conflict is not necessarily a sign that your marriage is broken. The fact that you have conflict happens to everybody. How you handle conflict, people you deal with it, is a sign.
Okay. All right. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for sharing this invaluable information. Before we leave, again, we're talking about the connection between the mind, body, and soul. And I understand that you're probably pretty much in the fittest condition that you've been in many years. Can you just share briefly with our listeners how that came about in your beautiful home in St. Thomas? I know you split your time, I think, from Houston and St. Thomas, but that it just sounds wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me to share that part of my life. I probably, like many people, have struggled. Well, I have struggled. Let me just name it. I have struggled with remaining on any kind of diet or plan or that kind of thing. And so with life's ups and downs, I found myself using food as a way to cope. And so when I became more aware of that, then I started to get on a plan, which it's been about 3 years now. And it's been on 3 years that I've been very focused, let me say that. And so the first focus for me was focusing on nutrition and kind of changing my diet to a plant-based diet and things like that. And then 2 years ago, almost to the date, I got on the program called E2M, and it's called Eager to Motivate. It's been an amazing program for me and for many other people because it's comprehensive and the structure is already there. So they have nutritionists, mental fitness coaches, Pilates, yoga, you name it, all kinds of exercise programs. And they have nutrition plans, both vegan and healthy plant-based, meat-based plans for people who prefer meat. And they have inspirational talks, medical doctors like yourself that come through and do educational talks and things like that. And the structure of it, the community, the support, I don't know what else I want to say about that, but it's been effective for me and many of my friends, and it's been affordable. It's been affordable and flexible because I can do anything I want to from my house, which I'm going to get off and do my workout afterwards. Hence,
Okay.
yes. So so I lost 50
Okay.
pounds, losing. I'm not
Yeah.
all, but I'll tell you, I think the biggest miracle is that they had openings for mental fitness coaching. I didn't really, this is something I think I need to say, is that I didn't feel worthy of applying because I didn't feel like I was all there yet. I'm not at my goal weight, even though I've lost. So I didn't plan on applying at all. And I was approached by several people. And I had one of my friends, strong believer, and she said, I just believe you need to do this. Anyway, long story short, I'm one of the mental fitness coaches.
Okay, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That falls under the category of a
Wounded.
introvert like myself having a podcast. Okay. And
God uses all of us. And I think it falls under the category of recognizing that perfection is not required to be used by God. You know?
Amen, sister.
Yes. Gotta-
I was fascinated by the concept of understanding our spouse's dreams as a way to resolve long-standing conflicts with our spouses or significant others. At first, I thought Dr. Miller was talking about actual dreams, but she was referring to the dreams and aspirations of our spouses that we or even they may not be able to articulate off the cuff. What is the understanding reason for one spouse always wanting to go out to eat and another to have a home-cooked meal on Sunday? So one spouse's underlying dream of going out shows love, special occasion, from childhood, while another spouse's memories are the opposite. A big home-cooked meal meant love. So my final word, try to catch your spouse's dream. Understand their dream and help fulfill that dream. See the attached references for Dr. John Gottman's book. See the attached link to Dr. Miller's practice. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is Dr. Christine Ince wishing you a balanced mind, body, and soul.